It's definitely the case that the US had a biological warfare facility in Sierra Leone, which may very well be the source of the virus. It certainly was Fort Detrick in Maryland, which is the source of the anthrax viruses, which were used on 9/11. And if they're capable of shooting down airplanes and all the other things that we're accusing them of, are they capable of spreading viruses in order to achieve their geopolitical goals? And I'm afraid the answer has to be yes. We can't be for sure that they did it, but the idea that they might is very definitely there. And we're running into a situation now where there is going to be a crash, as we said earlier in the first part of the show. And when that crash happens, it's not going to be the fault of the capitalist system. It's not going to be a fault of the politicians who've basically given a free run to these people. It's going to be the fault of foreign enemies, the Russians, the American, the Africans, the Chinese, ISIS. ISIS, of course, is being hyped into this huge threat on the basis of these so-called beheading videos, which are basically fake videos, as the Times has already pointed out. But the politicians are all mouthing off as if these videos had some kind of real valency, and they haven't.
What makes you say that? I mean, we've had 3 of these beheading videos now.
Yes, and various experts have said, in the mainstream media, I'm talking about Murdoch's Times, have looked at these videos and said that they are fake. And don't forget the source for all these...
They did the first one. I'm not sure about the second.
People. Do you know the source of all of these videos, Tony? It's a site called Search for International Terrorist Entities, which is based in Washington, D.C., and run by somebody with very close links to Mossad called Rita Katz. And they say that they got hold of these videos. ISIS were going to put these videos up and tell everybody how nasty they were, but because they're so clever people, Search for International Terrorist Entities, they got hold of the videos from ISIS before ISIS used them, and they used them. And that is the source of all 3 videos. Search for International Terrorist Entities from Washington, D.C., run by an ex-Mossad agent called Rita Katz. And that's where all these videos came from.
So are you saying that these beheadings didn't happen?
I'm saying that the beheadings didn't happen in those videos. They certainly didn't. Dr. David Halpin, who's one of the critics of the David Kelly inquest, he's been online saying, well, look, I'm a doctor. These people are not being beheaded. If you behead somebody... There are beheading videos on all over the internet. A score or more of people were beheaded in Saudi Arabia in August alone. And ISIS definitely does behead people. We've seen them beheading Syrian soldiers and civilians inside Syria. That's when they were the heroes of this time last year. They were the freedom fighters that we were going to bomb Assad to get rid of, to help to power. And they certainly do behead people. The fact is that these 3 videos are in fact fakes. They are not beheading videos at all, as the Times pointed out, and various experts have had a look at them. But nevertheless, the mainstream politicians in the West are pretending that these videos are real, just as they're pretending that the Russians shot down MH17, even though the evidence is overwhelmingly the opposite. And I'm afraid we've now reached a level of lies in the international media, which is definitely indicative that we're on the road to world war, I'm afraid.
You could possibly be right. ISIS in Iraq. France launches its first airstrike on the Islamic State targets. We just heard today in The Independent, Heather Saul writing, says France has carried out its first airstrike in Iraq, destroying a logistics depot held by the Islamic State. ISIS militancy office of the President Francois Hollande said Rafale fighter jets struck the depot in northeast Iraq. The target was entirely destroyed.
What they want to do is ISIS has definitely been, in my view, been set up by Western intelligence services working with the Israelis. The al-Baghdadi, it transpires, is actually been trained according to...
Is he the ISIS leader, yeah?
Yeah, he's the Caliph. He's supposedly the descendant of the Prophet, according to the ideology that's being promulgated in the Western media. But Edward Snowden has pointed out, and it's floating around out there in the ether, that he's known to be a Mossad agent, and that in actual fact the whole of ISIS has been set up by Mossad and Western intelligence services, because what they will then do is invade the area. And that means that they are then in control of the oil fields, and they get their chance to remove Assad.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because we've also heard this week that Syrian rebels are in charge of the Golan Heights. Now, tell us about the historical and geopolitical significance of the Golan Heights.
Well, the Golan Heights were taken from Syria in the 1973 war by
So it's
the Israeli
officially
army.
Part of Syrian territory?
It's officially Syrian territory, according to the international law, but it's been under the control of the Israelis since 1973, and there's been UN peacekeepers keeping the Israelis Israelis and the Syrian army separate. But now the Syrian army have been driven out of the region by al-Nusra Front and various other Islamic terrorists who are allied with al-Qaeda and with us, of course. And now the UN have been driven out, which allows the Israelis, if they wanted to invade Syria as part of a Western attack, not on ISIS, but ultimately to try and remove the regime in Damascus, which in fact Bashar al-Assad this year has won a presidential election in Damascus, which looks a lot more freer and fairer than the one we saw in Egypt. But nevertheless, he must go. This is what the strategy is. We were going to go to war with him this time last year because he supposedly used chemical weapons, although all the evidence suggests the opposite, that it was the rebels who used chemical weapons and that they probably got them from Libya through the hands, no doubt, of the Libyan Islamic fighting group who worked very closely with MI6. So I'm quite sure MI6 know an awful lot more about this than we imagine. Roland Dumas, the former French foreign minister, is on the record in France as saying before the Syrian war he was approached by British officials who said, we are going to run an armed rebellion in Syria, do you want to participate? So in other words, it's quite possible that David Cameron and MI6 are responsible for the war in Syria, with all of the deaths and destruction that implies. Now, what should we do if we could prove that elements within MI6 were responsible for that war? What sort of punishment would you suggest would be appropriate for people like that, Tony?
Islamic State is a slur on our faith, say leading Muslims. This is in The Guardian, Saturday 13th of December. Imams have called on David Cameron and others to stop using the phrase, which they say gives credibility to a terrorist organisation. The Prime Minister and media must stop legitimising the terror group rampaging through Syria and Iraq by describing it as Islamic State, according to a coalition of imams and organisations representing British Muslims. Use of the jihadis' preferred title, they argue, gives credibility to Sunni militants and slurs the Islamic faith. Signatories to a letter to David Cameron include Sughra Ahmed, President of the Islamic Society of Britain. It admits that UK Muslims need to do more to dissuade their young men from being misled into taking part in the group's hatred and poison. We shall take every opportunity to continue to say clearly and loudly, not in our name and not for our faith, they write.
Well, that's all very well, but in actual fact, I think there is overwhelming evidence that British Special Forces have been training these people. Now, somebody knows what's going on, and we're going to find out.